Welcome. It's good to be back with you. Time is surely flying, and I can't believe we're approaching the holiday season, the fall season of the high holidays, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and then Sukkot following thereafter. This year, Rosh Hashanah will be celebrated on Saturday and Sunday, September 19th and 20th. The month of Tishrei, which is the first month of the Jewish year, coincides with the astrological sign of Libra. I think I mentioned this sometimes in the past. And Libra, as you know, is represented by the scales. I don't think it's a coincidence, or maybe it is, but Rosh Hashanah is also known as the Day of Judgment. It's called Yom Hadin in Hebrew. And judgment is many times symbolized by the scales. It's a common symbol in the legal system. And for us as Jews during this time of year, we stand in judgment before God for our past deeds during the last 12 months. We say that on the high holiday prayers that there are three things that could tide in our favor and keep us away from an evil decree. And these three things are prayer, tefillah, repentance, teshuvah, and tzedakah, acts of kindness and charity. There's a famous folk tale about the power of prayer that is appropriate for this season of self-examination. And I'd like to read that story to you now. It's called Shlomo's Scales. December 1700. It was a cold winter day in Poland, and a blanket of snow covered the entire country. The city streets were filled with people bundled up in fur coats, and the country peasants were busy warming their homes with wood and themselves with vodka. The holiday season was approaching and everyone was in good spirits. But in the Jewish ghetto of Krakow, gloom and fear filled the air and moaned from every corner. Persecuted by poverty and hate, the Jews of Krakow had but one source of worldly joy, and that too was being taken from them. The children, unfortunately, were plagued by disease. It was the beginning of an epidemic. The doctors were helpless to stop it, and the various home remedies did nothing. Every day the town was visited with more heartbreaking tragedies. The only one they could turn to, as usual, was their Father in heaven, and he didn't seem to be listening to their prayers. The rabbi of the community had declared a fast day, then another, then 3 days of prayer and self-examination. But nothing seemed to work. A week of supplication was announced, but before it began, the elders of the community decided to make a dream query employed by the masters of the secret wisdom of the Kabbalah. It was a drastic move, but they felt that they had no other choice. They purified themselves, fasted, recited psalms all day, immersed in the mikveh, and then requested from heaven, according to ancient Kabbalistic formulas, that they be given some sort of a sign that night in their sleep. And that night, they all had the same dream. An old man in a white robe appeared and said, "Shlomo the butcher should pray before the congregation." Early the next morning, they met in shul and related their dream to each other, and it was clear what they had to do. The 20 of them solemnly walked to Shlomo's home and knocked on the door. When his wife opened, she almost fainted at the sight of them. "Yes," she stammered, pushing her loose hair under the kerchief on her head. We want to speak to your husband. Is he home? May we come in? Shlomo came to the door, invited them all in, shook everyone's hand, and ran around looking for chairs. When they were finally all seated, one of them began. Shlomo, we made a dream query last night. We asked what to do about the epidemic, and we all had the same dream. We dreamed that you have to lead the prayers today. Shlomo was dumbfounded. If it weren't such a serious matter, he would have thought that this was some kind of a joke. I should lead the prayers? Why, I can't even read properly. What good would it possibly do? Shlomo, just come and do what you can. You don't have to really lead. Just pray in front of everyone. Maybe there will be a miracle. Just come and give it a try. We have summoned everyone to shul. Just come and say a few words. Anything is better than what we have right now. So Shlomo, with no other choice, left his house and accompanied them. But as soon as they had entered at the crowded synagogue and closed the door behind them, Shlomo suddenly broke away and ran back outside, down the street, out of sight. What could they do? He disappeared. They didn't even know where to look. They had no choice other than to wait. A few minutes later, the door opened, and in came Shlomo, pushing a wheelbarrow covered with a cloth. All eyes were on him as he went up to the podium, pulled off the cloth, and lifted an old set of scales out of the barrow. He brought the butcher's scales into the shul. The scales were very heavy, but Shlomo lifted them high above his head, his face contorted with the effort, tears streaming from his eyes. Here, he yelled at the ceiling, here, God, take them, take the scales. That must be why you want me to lead the prayers, right? So take the scales and heal the children. Just heal the children, okay? By now, Shlomo was sobbing loudly, and the whole place was dead silent. A few men rushed over and helped him put the scales on the table in the front of the room, and the congregation began their prayers. That evening, the children were already getting better. You can imagine the joy and festivities that followed. They even made a nice glass case for the scales and left the whole thing there permanently for all to see. But after a few days, when the excitement died down, the elders had to admit that they couldn't figure it out. After all, there were tens of shops in the ghetto that used scales, and all of them were owned by honest, God-fearing Jews. What could be so special about Shlomo's scales? The answer was soon in coming. When they went around checking all the other scales, they discovered that every one of them, without exception, was a bit off. Certainly never enough to constitute bad business, but inaccurate nonetheless. It seems that Shlomo checked his scales twice every day, while the others checked only occasionally. That's what God wants, Shlomo explained. The legend has it that these scales remained on display in that Krakow synagogue for over 200 years, until the Germans destroyed everything in World War II. The importance of honesty, of honest scales, the power of prayer, these are all ideas that are set forth in our celebration of the holidays. We look at each other, we look at ourselves, we feel the importance of knowing the right way to do business in our relationships in business and in our personal relationships. What would the high holidays be without the shofar? The shofar plays an important part in the preparation and celebration of the high holidays. During the last month of Elul, the shofar is blown every morning during services. It reminds us of the upcoming holiday and the importance to begin our retrospective and of thinking of ways to improve our lives and our relationships. The blessing we say before blowing the shofar states that we are commanded to hear the sound of the shofar. And so, in keeping with this commandment, I will blow the 3 different tones to enable you to partake in this mitzvah. Here is the ram's horn. We have 3 distinct tones that we blow. The first one is called tekiah, which means one long blast of the shofar. The next tone is called shavarim, which is 3 blasts. And the last tone is called truah, which are 9 short staccato blasts. Excuse me. There are a variety of ideas why the shofar, or the ram's horn, was chosen as the announcing tool throughout our history until today. It was used for announcing alarm, for battle, for celebration. It's connected to perhaps the Akedah of Isaac, the binding or sacrifice of Isaac, when Abraham saw a ram caught by its horn in the thickets of a bush and took the ram instead of his son to sacrifice, and the ram's horn maybe had its origination over this story. But there's another very interesting and beloved story called The Announcing Tool. It's a story by Rabbi Mark Gilman, and it's one of my favorites. So indulge me, please. I would like to read this story to you. A long time ago, when people all lived in one place, getting the news was easy. They had yellers who would walk around town. After no more than a morning of yelling, everyone knew that something special had happened. When people began living all over the place, even the yellers couldn't get the news across. Mostly, people just didn't get the news. But some special events just had to be announced. And the arrival of the new year was the most special event of all. So a man named Enoch asked God what to do to get the news of the new year around the world. God said to Enoch, "You need a special announcing tool. Go find one." The next day, Enoch returned with 2 rocks. "Listen to my fine announcing tool," he said, and banged the 2 rocks together, making a loud rock-banging noise. God said to Enoch, "What kind of announcing tool is this to tell of the arrival of the new year? Rocks do not make music, they only make noise. The new year is a time for music and singing, not banging and yelling." God frowned at Enoch, who scurried off to find a new announcing tool. The next day, Enoch returned with a gong. "Listen, my fine announcing tool, which makes a beautiful sound," he said, and he hit the gong, which made a gong-ringing sound. God said to Enoch, "What kind of an announcing tool is this to tell of the arrival of the new year? The gong does not make a beautiful sound, but it is made of iron, and iron is used to make weapons of war. The new year is a time of peace, not war." God frowned at Enoch, who scurried off to find another announcing tool. The next day, Enoch returned with a harp. "Listen to my fine announcing tool, which makes a beautiful sound and is not made of iron." Then Enoch strummed a tune on the harp. God said to Enoch, "The harp also will not do as an announcing tool for the new year. The harp does indeed make a beautiful sound, and it is not a weapon of war, but the harp is too soft a sound to announce the new year. The new year is a time of loud rejoicing, and a loud announcing tool is needed, a tool that will carry the news of the new year from hilltop to hilltop around the world." God frowned at Enoch, who scurried off to find another announcing tool. The next day, Enoch arrived with a golden trumpet. "Listen to my fine announcing tool, which makes a beautiful sound, is not made of iron, and is loud enough to carry the news from hilltop to hilltop." Then Enoch blew a loud note on the golden horn. God said to Enoch, "The golden horn is a good announcing tool, but not good enough for the new year. True, the golden horn makes beautiful sounds, is not made of iron, and is loud enough, but the horn is not a natural instrument. It is made by man and not by me. It is hollow, but not naturally hollow. It is made hollow by human hands. It only makes a beautiful sound after it has been pounded and shaped by human hands. The new year is not a time to glorify human creations. The new year is for all creatures, the animals and people as well. Find something to celebrate the new year, which is for all my creatures." God frowned at Enoch, who scurried off to find a new announcing tool. The next day, Enoch was a little late in coming, but he finally arrived a little out of breath. "I am embarrassed to present my new announcing tool. It is only a ram's horn. Not nearly as beautiful as the golden horn, or as sweet and delicate as the harp, but it does make fine sounds, and it is not a weapon of war, and it is loud enough to get the news from hilltop to hilltop. I have done nothing to the horn. It is naturally hollow, and it comes from one of your creatures. But there's just one thing. All the other instruments were easy to make a sound with, but this ram's horn is impossible to play. I blow, and then a toot comes out, and then nothing, and then maybe another toot. I wish it were easier." God smiled the biggest smile at Enoch and taught him how to blow the ram's horn for the big celebration of the new year, which was soon to begin. We have many ways to greet each other during the holiday season, with either Shana Tova, a good year, or L'Shana Tova Tikatevu, may you be inscribed for a good year in the book of life, or L'Shana Tova Umetuka, have a good and sweet year. Thus we have apples and honey to help us along in rejoicing in the sweetness and our wishes for the coming year. Whichever salutation you use, the sentiment remains the same. Our wish for a good, healthy, prosperous, and peaceful new year. This is my wish for you all. Have a good year.